Place Australia acknowledges traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognises their continuing connection to lands, waters, skies and communities. We pay our deepest respects to elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples.
Anyone who knows me knows I'm absolutely terrified of flying, and yet I fly all the time. It's a real challenge to get on a plane every single time. I have to wrestle with myself and I have to give myself things to do.
Catherine Liddle is the CEO of SNAICC.
So SNAICC is the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children's peak body. Our job is to advocate to governments on behalf of children and families and the members that we represent to ensure that child safety, development and well-being is paramount in any policy or any program that the governments design.
Catherine lives in Alice Springs,
which is my grandfather's homelands. So on that country, you would refer to me as being Mbundarinya, belonging to Alice Springs. And my nana's country, incredible country, picks up at Peradama lands, but she would call herself Lurija.
Catherine's job as CEO of SNAICC takes her all over Australia, hence the flying, and the need to think about other things when she's on a plane.
And one of those things is think about, it's so boring, isn't it? But I think about the National Agreement.
That's the National Agreement on Closing the Gap, developed in partnership between Australian governments and the Coalition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peak organisations.
And I compare it to things like the clouds and aeroplanes and runways and all of those sorts of things because it's a way of keeping me grounded.
Catherine says it was one particular plane journey that has become a perfect metaphor for the work she's doing with the National Agreement and shared decision making. The plane was going from Perth to Alice Springs,
which is beautiful landscape, and I'm going home and it's over red soil. I am really happy with red soil. And the pilot comes over and says, look, we're going to have a really fast flight. We should have you down in about an hour and 20 minutes. Beautiful conditions ahead. Everything is good. And I'm looking down at the ground and I'm thinking, the plane's bouncing a little bit. That's not normal for a really clear flight. I'm looking out the window and I notice a couple of clouds. We hit this incredible supercell and the plane is just jumping around and moving like nothing I've been on for a very long time. And the turbulence sign comes on and we're told that we've hit quite a large cell and we're going to try and get around it, but it is not going to be a short flight anymore while we try and get around it. And it was at that point in time where, again, thinking about how I get out of the aeroplane and apply it to the world around me, it was like, okay, this is again very much like the National Agreement and shared decision making. We are sitting in a plane that is really well designed. It is really well designed. It's been tested and tested and tested. Everything it needs to fly is there. And the pilots flying that plane are going to do a great job of it. But it is flying a path that no one could chart. No one saw that supercell coming out of it. We just have to trust when it hits that rough spot that the pilots and the design of the plane are genuinely good enough to get us through it.
So far in this series, you've heard about why shared decision making is important and why governments need to share power. That's what gets the plane off the ground and into the air. Today's episode is about making sure the plane is built before takeoff, how to build relationships and trust, and how good structures can help you navigate rough patches when they come. I'm Brooke Boney, a proud Gamilaroi woman and journalist with a background in public policy. From Partnerships for Local Action and Community Empowerment, this is Making Place Matter, a podcast where we ask, who decides?
So shared decision making sounds really obscure, but basically it means that you've got a seat at the table, and it's based on the fact that what Aboriginal people understand inherently is if we do not have a seat at the table, then we're on the menu.
Shared decision making is all about relationships because it requires collaboration between diverse groups of people. Often at the start, there'll be power imbalances between groups, and trust may be low depending on the history and context. That's especially true for First Nations communities, where relationships with government have been defined by decisions made about them, not with them.
When you're talking to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, we have seen so many things come and go, so many of the same programs designed and piloted, and it doesn't matter how successful they are, they're quashed, and back comes the department or the government with a new shiny thing. Here you go, you mob, we've got it right this time, and we want to work with you. This is not co-design, this is partnership. Our communities have heard it 100 times. So accept that when you're talking to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, we're tired.
That history doesn't disappear because the process has changed. Trust has to be earned.
While we're sitting at that table, we also need the people that are at that table to understand that they are not the experts in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people's lives. Our communities are, and there is no one expert in what the life of an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person experiences. There is no expert. Our communities are incredibly diverse and our challenges might have similarities, but in each and every one of our communities, there will be different drivers. There will be a different understanding of how you solve a problem. But when you go into those communities, accept that they are the expert. They are the expert. And change the way that you talk to us, change the way that you work with us.
How do you build that trust in community when you're starting out? And how do you navigate low trust from these previous bad experiences?
Just do it. You just do it. And you accept that that's what you're going into your regions with. You reach out to people who know more than you to understand what it is you might be walking into. And that means reaching out to your community-controlled organisations or to your Aboriginal leaders and make sure you're getting enough diversity in that because, communities have different opinions and they're allowed to have different opinions. And that is what makes diversity so very, very worthwhile, is that you're looking at a problem from multiple angles. But just be open and say, we're going to reset this, and accept that in that journey that you embark on, there will be ups and downs, and you don't walk away from an up and down. You go, well, how do we reset? Because if I've learnt anything through the National Agreement, that is that if it seems easy, then you are getting something fundamentally wrong. There should be a level of tension, You should be pushing yourself past a boundary of comfort. And if you're comfortable in shared decision making, then you're not really trying.
It's a myth to believe that Aboriginal people are one homogenous group. We're over 520-odd different tribal groups within Australia, all living in a land that belongs to them.
You met William Tilmouth in episode 2. William is an Arrernte man from Mparntwe, Alice Springs, and the co-chair of Children's Ground, an Aboriginal-controlled community organisation committed to transforming health, employment and wellbeing for First Nations people. Their focus is early years education. Given the diversity of expertise in First Nations communities, relationship building isn't just a step in the process, it is the process. You can't shortcut your way into a community. You have to show up, learn, and listen.
People will tell you where you don't fit, where you fit. You got no room there, you can't go there. You can talk with this mob, but not about that, It belongs to that mob, It's something you learn as you go along, and it's something I had to learn on my way back home.
Aboriginal people got no problem being forthright. They'll tell you. They will tell you, oh yeah, you know what? That person over there is going to tell you this, and that person over there is going to tell you that. And that is fine. They are allowed to have those differences. There's also something in ensuring that you are responding to those people that have genuine leadership positions as well, because they're in those positions, like your community-controlled services, because they're actually voted in. They're accountable to their communities. We have to walk down the street with our mob
And so, William, how then do you navigate conflict?
Well, it's community acceptance. They know you, they know who you are, and they know if you're genuine or not. And if they accept you and are prepared to work with you, then you got a full road ahead of you.
If we go back to the analogy of the plane, this is the turbulence. When there's disagreement, you have to trust the structure around you. And in most cases, it comes back to where you're trying to land. What is the shared outcome everyone has agreed on?
When it comes to getting an outcome, even those people with differences will agree on what the shared outcome would be. And that is that we want our families to be strong. We want our communities to be able to be self-determining. And we want to say in the decisions that are made about us, everyone is going to tell you that.
No culture in the world desires to live in poverty. No culture in the world desires that their people are just docile bodies that drift with the currents of time. Nobody subscribes to that sort of lifestyle. People do want to have a say and get very frustrated when they don't have a say. But doing it this way, giving people a voice, giving people choice, empowers them to make decisions directly about their situation and being able to deal with that.
Operating across 9 sites in the Northern Territory, Children's Ground gives agency to each community, letting them decide how to design, deliver, and evaluate their programs. That means any partner, government, or philanthropic organisation has to understand and accept that before they come to the table.
What I look for is people who are genuine, people who will listen to the people they serve, people who will participate in whatever the people on the ground wish, because all road leads back to the community. And that's the way I like to see it. And if people are prone to take on that mantle and believe in it, then I'm more welcome to work with them.
We only work in communities that we're invited into. In doing so, time is invested to build the foundation of a trusting relationship before the work begins.
Margot Beach is the General Manager of Dusseldorp Forum, a philanthropic family foundation that works towards a just and equitable Australian society. Margot says Dusseldorp take up to 12 months getting to know a community before moving forward.
Our way of working is around working in partnership, and what that actually means is being in community. It's doing the deep listening, it's understanding what the needs are outside of funding, and it's very much about hearing and seeing opportunities to make connections with other capabilities and resources to best support the outcomes that community is wanting.
So, Dusseldorp has been involved in one of the projects that is a gold standard across many measures, Marinuka in Burke in northwestern New South Wales. Can you explain how that came about?
Sure. So our involvement in the community of Burke came about by community leaders reaching out to us to talk to us about the issues that were impacting on families at that time in the community.
About 10 years ago, the Burke Tribal Council identified government-led services and initiatives had failed to reduce crime or improve child wellbeing in the remote New South Wales town.
Through those conversations, the idea of having a separate entity that could play a facilitating, coordinating role, not as another service provider, because that's certainly not what the community was asking for, but they were asking for a way of working differently across the services to better meet the needs of children and families. And in those discussions was articulated an independent facilitating role, which was named Marinuka, and we funded that body of people to start the work in Burke.
Marinuka is what's called a backbone team. They're not involved in service delivery, but are looking at what needs to change across the whole system.
The Backbone team is a group of staff that are supporting the work on the ground for community. So they build the local governance structures to start to really develop the local solutions on the ground that can be implemented, tested, evaluated.
This is the team Margot's been working alongside, and for her, being physically present over an extended period has been vital to building relationships.
So, in order to be able to gather that insight, it really does take a commitment to being present and to being in place, coming to community with an open mind, with no agenda and with no timeline. So, really being open to the learning, the shared learning, and working at the community pace.
And so, how do you make sure that the right people are at the table when you are having these discussions?
I guess one of the things I've learned over the many years that I've been working alongside the community of Burke is to articulate and to question who's missing. And not knowing who's needing to be at the table is about just creating the space to have the conversation about who else should be at the table and being clear about the contribution of others in this discussion.
And so, then how do you navigate conflict when it arises in shared decision making?
The way that I've dealt with conflict over the past 10 years or so, and what I've seen in shared decision-making process, is to be able to acknowledge the conflict and to be able to show genuine respect and to create a space, a safe space, to better understand where the conflict's coming from and to start to understand how we could move beyond this conflict. And one of the questions I often ask is, what would it take for you to move forward on the consensus here? Because that question really starts to unpack what it is that is stopping that person from being committed to the decisions that are being made, or what is it that's happening for them both individually or within their organisation. And some of that may not be transparent to the group. So it's a rich learning to understand what are the drivers for an individual in sharing their conflict.
Back at Peak Body SNAICC, Catherine Liddle has a different example of where trust in a relationship was able to create change.
Connected Beginnings was the federal government's biggest commitment to closing the gap on early education and developmental outcomes for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children.
Connected Beginnings is a grant program that helps children and families access culturally appropriate support services like preschools. Except Catherine says the program didn't start with consultation with the community. They just got told this is happening.
The federal government didn't talk to anyone about whether or not that should be the biggest investment and why it would work. So, and it was moving like a steam train. It was moving so fast and there was nothing we could do to fix it. And our community's telling us that this program was not working in the way that the government understood it. The government at that point in time said, can we slow down? Can we have a conversation? I've listened and there is something wrong. We can't see what's wrong, but we understand something's wrong.
Catherine said they were able to analyse why the program wasn't working.
There were really simple things like there's 22 sites, only 2 of the sites were being administered by Aboriginal Community Controlled Services. So there was a place in Victoria and the early childhood service there was 100% Aboriginal. All the children that attended it were Aboriginal. It was stood up by the community. It's loved by the community. And over here we had another childcare service that didn't have a single Aboriginal child, and Connected Beginnings was being given to the non-Indigenous service provider without a single Aboriginal child enrolled in it. It turned out that there was a criteria in the procurement guidelines that said you cannot apply for this particular model unless you have 10 years experience in delivering projects worth $10 million or more, which meant unless you were a giant service provider, and none of our services at that point in time were giant service providers, had that experience. You had just wiped any of the experts out of contention and meant that this could only ever be delivered pretty much by non-Indigenous service providers. That's how incredible these barriers to service delivery can be.
Armed with this knowledge, the government started to listen and to put their trust in the community organisations.
So today we have more than 50 connected beginning sites, and it was handed over to Aboriginal control. So the sites went from 22 to 50 in 18 months. Again, unheard of, at a speed and scale absolutely unheard of. All sites are starting to show significant progress in early education domains. Some of them are reporting increases of about 25% in early education developmental domains. So this is unheard of. When we look at things like the latest developmental data, across the country there was a massive backward trend for all children in Australia, and that included Aboriginal children. But for the very first time in the data sets, what we saw was the cohort most resistant to the backward trend was actually Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, which meant that the reforms on the ground had held strong. Now, you might not necessarily see that or feel that on the ground, but what you might sense is that your communities are a little bit more settled. You won't know that that was the national agreement. You won't know that that was shared decision making, but you know that there are things starting to change in your environment that weren't there before.
William Tilmouth from Children's Ground says he's seen the impact shared decision making has had on his community.
The whole persona left, historically Aboriginal people would walk into a room and they would take up the back seats and stand at the back and sit at the back. And those days are gone now. We take our seats up front, we talk up front, we show our presence, and that to me is empowerment to the extreme, when your voice is being heard and it's being listened to and you're right up front presenting it.
When you fly a lot, you know there are smooth flights and bumpy ones. But the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with uncertainty. The more you learn to trust the plane. Shared decision making is much the same. You get better at building the structures, the relationships, and the trust that makes turbulence easier to navigate. Catherine's plane journey that day from Perth eventually landed in Alice Springs.
That 1 hour and 20-minute flight took us 3 hours, and when we landed we couldn't even get off the plane because the supercell was still above us, so it was another 40 minutes on the tarmac while we were getting smashed by the incredible rains that came with that supercell. And in many ways that's what we're dealing with right now when we're talking about shared decision making and the pathways for change. Those things do take longer to hit the ground than we'd like them to do. And there are still gaps in that. I have to be really open about that. There are still gaps in being able to communicate to people about how they can use these remarkable tools to trust that these vehicles have an incredible infrastructure around them that will keep you moving through the toughest storms and sometimes journeys that are taking a bit longer than you thought, but they will eventually get you down safely if they are fully committed to and if they are being flown by the right partners. And the right partners sit in shared decision making.
Thanks to Catherine Liddle, William Tilmouth and Margot Beach for their time. This is Making Place Matter. Series 1 is about who decides. I'm Brooke Boney. Follow Making Place Matter in your favourite podcast app so you don't miss an episode. You can also head to placeaustralia.org for more resources. Making Place Matter is a podcast from Partnerships for Local Action and Community Empowerment. This series, Who Decides, is produced by Dead Set Studios.